Do you have an independent mind? If so, I hope you'll subscribe to my YouTube channel. Just click on the subscribe button, ring that little bell, and stay up to date with my daily content. Thank you. So there's a particular question that I'm really eager to ask my next guest, and it might be naive, it might be outright dopey. That will not stop me, however. It's nice to have Michael Moss back with me. Michael Moss wrote the #1 New York Times bestseller, Salt, Sugar, Fat, and now is back with Hooked, Food, Free Will, and How the Food Giants Exploit Our Addictions. Michael, nice to see you. Thank you for being here.
Oh, great to talk to you again.
Here comes the dopey question. I know
Yep.
some very smart people who have worked hard and run afoul of the law. In fact, said differently, they have worked hard while running afoul of the law. And I can think of one guy in particular who sort of epitomizes what I'm talking about, a bookie who literally had $1 million in a PVC pipe in his front yard until law enforcement came along one day with a front end loader and dug it up, and then he went to jail. But this guy was razor sharp, brilliant with figures. And I always used to wonder, why couldn't he apply those talents to something legitimate? Because I'm sure if he'd been on the straight and narrow and applying that mindset, he'd have made a lot of money. You're wondering, what does this have to do with Michael Moss and his new book, Hooked? As I was reading the book and appreciating the level of knowledge that the food industry, the processed food industry, that they possess about us, how they have our number, I wondered the same question. Couldn't they make healthy foods that are similarly so appealing to our taste buds, we can all lose weight in the process? Or is there no profit motive involved when we lose weight?
Yeah, I mean, look, I still don't want to see this as this evil empire that intentionally set out to make us, hugely overweight or otherwise ill from their products. I mean, I think they would rather be selling food that's good for us if they can. But in a weird way, Michael, they're more addicted to sort of making their food cheap, convenient, buzzy to the brain than we are. And now they're really stuck between that proverbial rock and a hard place because more and more people are caring about what they put in their bodies. They're trying to eat better. And these companies now have a really hard time playing a meaningful role going forward, having gotten us kind of so dependent, right, on their ultra processed food products for all these decades.
But could they make stuff that's good for us and tastes as good as everything we are eating?
Yeah, I think so, but it's really hard. And it's funny because I put that question to Nestle, one of the biggest processed food companies out there. They have the Hot Pocket brand, and they were kind of impressing upon me how in the last few years they've been cutting back on salt, sugar, and fat. But when I said to them, yeah, but what are you doing to respond to what every nutritionist says, which is stuff those things with broccoli rabe or Brussels sprouts or broccoli, and you get this kind of blank look from their scientists, their food engineers, because that's expensive and they are hooked on making their products as cheap as possible, knowing that that excites our brain.
My takeaway from your book, one of many, but the primary takeaway that I have from Hooked is that with regard to processed food, and in the context of the age old debate about free will, this is no longer a fair fight. They are too good. They have our number. And for anyone who doubts what I've just said, I have one word: Oreos.
I spent time with the former general counsel of Philip Morris, right, who for years and years was not only the biggest tobacco manufacturer in North America, but also the biggest manufacturer of processed food. They had General Foods, Kraft, Nabisco, which makes Oreos. And Steve told me that he was one of those people who could smoke one cigarette a day in a business meeting, put the pack away, have no unction to pull it out again. He could not go near one of his company's bags of Oreo cookies for fear of losing control and eating half of the bag. People inside this industry know how powerful these products are. And it's not our fault when we lose control. They're engineered in a way that robs us of free will, executive function, willpower.
What is the Doi pack? Speaking of Oreos, just to let people in on the genius and the thought and the design that goes into what we all take for granted when we're in a grocery store.
Right. So Oreos used to be and still are in packages in these little plastic trays where each Oreo was in its own little slot, right? And they came along and realized if they put those Oreos in a bag where you could dip your hand inside, and especially if you could kind of squish that bag on the bottom, it would stand up on its own. So you could be doing
Right.
something else, not paying any attention. That hand is going in the bag, grabbing a handful of Oreos. We would not only love them, but we would want more and more. So the Doy bag is kind of the epitome of convenience, of mindful snacking that the food industry invented to sell more product to us.
Don't lose me in the science. You did a nice job in the book in making this all very approachable, but do explain to me the role of dopamine. How does it work? How have they figured out the way in which we're wired?
Yeah, one of the hallmarks of addiction, whether you're talking cigarettes, alcohol, drugs, is how fast the substance hits the brain. Smoke can effectuate the brain in roughly about 10 seconds at a max. Alcohol, some drugs, narcotics, or somewhere in between. But they did a test recently where they put sugar on people's tongue and asked them to push a button when they tasted sweet. And so they were pushing that button within less than a second because we by nature are designed to be drawn towards sweet taste. And so things like sugar plays a trick, right? It goes on the tongue, it stimulates the taste buds, sends a signal to the brain, which releases this natural chemical in our body called dopamine, which is there to get us to do things that are important to our life. And one of the critical things to understand here about this is that it's not so much that we're addicted to food, it's that we by nature are drawn to food, to eating, and even overeating. And these companies in the last 50 years have changed the nature of our food in a way that has made overeating an everyday thing.
And Michael, when I said at the outset that it's become an unfair fight, what I'm referring to are men and women in lab coats who have crafted 56 different, almost as many varieties as they are of Heinz ketchup, 56 different types of sugar.
And they've marched around the store, engineering bliss points, they call it, for sugar, not just for things that we know are sweet, like soda and ice cream and cookies. They've added sugar to bread, to yogurts, to pasta sauce, knowing that, we'll be wowed by that perfect amount of sweetness in those products. And the problem is when we drag ourselves over to the produce aisle and try to eat more of those things nutritionists tell us we should, those vegetables and whole fruits, our body and our brain, rebels because it's gotten used to tasting sweet and everything.
Something else that you've unlocked for me recently on radio, just as part of a non sequitur. I don't even know why I brought it up, very Seinfeldian, but I went on a rant complaining about wheat thins and how hard it is for me to find the original wheat thin. Like, who the hell are all these people that need 50 different versions of wheat thins? Or I talked about how orange juice now has become an obstacle for me to find the one with the pulp because there are so many different gradations of orange juice.
Yeah.
You've explained in this book the role of variety. What role
Yes.
is that playing in this larger conversation?
Yeah, by nature, we are drawn to variety. It's why humans are able to spread around the globe and fall in love with food as diverse as whale blubber, right? And so the companies, knowing this, have gone nuts designing variable versions of their products. And it's why you walk into the cereal aisle and there's 200 versions of sugary starch there, knowing that we by nature get excited about variety.
I mean, even with regard to Captain Crunch, right? It used to be one form of Captain Crunch when we were kids. Now you've got to wade through all the different variations.
Yeah, there's something about new too that really grabs the brain. One of the scientists I met and spent time with calls us infovores because we get excited about just information for information's sake. And that's why, though, on the front of labels of these packages, you see the word new in like big, bold letters. They know that stimulates the brain. Just looking at the word new will release that dopamine, causing you to want and desire that product.
So I have a prop. I would like to tell you that I bought this just to be able to show to Michael Moss today. The truth of the matter is that I ate one of these this morning. I've never grown out of the habit of loving Pop Tarts. In the book, you are in, I guess you're in Kellogg one day,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And you smell that same smell that we all remember
Yeah.
from childhood. Explain.
Yeah, this was a research and development laboratory at Kellogg's in Battle Creek, Michigan, where I'd gone to talk to them about various aspects, and they had messed up a big batch of Pop Tarts, and they were dumping it into a bin, and the aroma wafted across the floor, right, and instantly took me back to my days as a latchkey kid in elementary school when I would come home, let myself in the house, and put a Pop Tart in the toaster. Nobody was watching, right? The power of memory is so strong, including aroma, and the company, and that's why the company spends so much time, working on us and our eating habits, starting at a really young age, knowing that as we develop these memories and associate their products with good times in our lives, we will forever remember that. It happened with the pandemic, Michael. Look, we thought we were going to get away from the vending machine when we all had to work at home.
True.
We turned our kitchen cabinets into vending machines because we went to the supermarket and these memories of childhood came flooding back. The companies were so excited because they were selling gobs of stuff that we hadn't eaten since we were kids.
So, Michael, you made reference previously to the Philip Morris CEO who in 2000 defined addiction as a repetitive behavior that some people find difficult to quit. Put this all together for us now. Is addiction the proper prism through which we should be looking at our attraction to processed foods?
If you had said to me, 5 years ago that Twinkies can be as addictive as heroin, I would have thought, like, that's totally nutso. But I'm totally convinced now that in many ways, these food products are actually more addictive than cigarettes, alcohol, even some drugs. For ways that we've talked about. So the memory, the speed that they hit the brain, the dopamine that they release, and our own kind of natural biology that the companies are exploiting. But I think kind of even more importantly, I think there are lessons to be drawn from the world of drug addiction that we can apply to food. And depending on kind of where you are on the spectrum of losing control of your eating habits, whether it's a full-blown eating disorder or just kind of that feeling of having lost that beauty and ritual of a home-cooked meal with your family, I think there are things we can learn from drug addiction. Abstinence, for example. Some people can't go near sugar or refined flour, and without losing control of these products. For the rest of it, it's more like finding ways to regain control over aspects of our eating. Convenience, for example, right? It's not that hard to make your own spaghetti sauce and avoid the prepared versions that are full of salt and sugar.
As you describe in the book, we've become a society that will eat anything, anywhere, at any time. 40 years ago, 50 years ago, that was not the case.
No, it seems like there was almost, one day overnight when parents stopped saying to their kids, stop snacking in between meals. Snacking has become the fourth
24/7.
American meal
Yep.
where we get as many, as something like, I forget, 500 calories, a quarter of our calories during the day of this kind of mindless snacking. And it's so perfect for the companies because we're not paying attention. And when we don't pay attention, the go part of the brain, the dopamine part is like going full charge, love that, let's eat more. And the stop part of the brain that sort of rationalizes and warns us about against doing things too much kind of gets put to sleep. And so it's a perfect way for the companies to sell us more product.
The book is excellent. I have a final question for Michael Moss concerning his manuscript, Hooked, and it's this. We are speaking live on the radio right now for Sirius XM. We happen to be having this conversation via Zoom, and you are in your kitchen. And I cannot help but notice that there's a refrigerator over your left shoulder. And I want to know what's in it.
You know, it's got some junk in there. I have to confess that I'm one of
Come
those
on,
people who can put their hand.
take that laptop,
Yeah,
walk
yeah.
10 feet over and open the door.
Here we go. We are doing it. Right? Can you see?
I can see.
I'm turning you. It's actually the camera, right? All right. Let's look. Ta-da!
Go ahead.
How bad? How bad is this, right? So, oh, we have a little sourdough left over from the pandemic back here, right? That's pretty cool. Um, this is actually what I've totally gotten addicted. We're drinking less soda in our house by switching to plain seltzer. And talk
Right.
about science, right? There's something about the bubbles that excite the brain almost as much as sugar. And if my 16-year-old could come down right now, he would tell you this is almost as satisfying to him as a soda. So that's pretty cool. We got cheese and eggs and chicken. I'm still.
Any
I,
processed foods in there? I mean, I keep the potato chips in my house in the fridge because they stay fresh longer. Anything
hold
like that in
on.
there?
Yeah, here are the potato chips, right? I love this particular brand, right? Uglies, right? But like I say, look, I don't want to make light because some people cannot help but devour the whole bag. And I feel incredibly fortunate that I can put my little hand in here and eat a handful of potato chips and then, put it away
Put
for
it
the
back.
day. So
Good for you. Hey, thank you so much. The book is called Hooked. I really appreciated it. It's an eye opener, and I thank you so much for coming back to the program.
really great to be with you. Thank you.
That's Michael Moss, and I'm back right after this.